we're a little more animated these days than normal. I brought a little fire to our House Republican Conference meeting this morning because I feel like Carlos does. I believe everything is at stake right now. This isn't campaign rhetoric. It's not hyperbole. You see what's happening around America. I am often reminded these days of the writings of the founders, the warnings of the people who put together the principles that made us the greatest nation in the history of the world. They warned us against times like this. In more recent times when we were kids, in the 80s, Ronald Reagan used to remind us all the time. You hear me repeat it. You have to understand freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. It is not passed along in the bloodstream. Reagan said it must be fought for, it must be protected, it has to be taught, passed along to the next generation so that they too will understand these principles that hold us together. I'm somewhat of a historian. I'm a constitutional law attorney. I know many of you we're all amateur historians here. You must be if you work on Capitol Hill. You watch and follow these developments. There's a small number of times in the history of America where the actual experiment in self-governance was on the ballot. The idea that we would preserve a constitutional republic, a one nation under God, a government of, by, and for the people, all that is in question right now. For the first time, really, in my lifetime, this is a real question the American people have to decide in November, in a midterm election for Congress and Senate. It's not something that we would have projected. I hoped and prayed it would never come to this, but here we are. The barbarians are in the gate. Last night I did a little, in a big group actually of VIPs that took on a tour. I don't get to do that very often anymore, but took a tour of the Capitol, a quick one. We wound up on the House floor, and I pointed to them, as you may have heard me reference this often. I think of it a lot. Why did Congress put "In God We Trust" above the rostrum of the Speaker's podium there in the center of the House? It's inscribed in the marble, as you know. You can't miss it when you walk in the chamber. It's the first thing people notice when they walk in at eye level and see it there. And I pointed out that in the visitor's guide to the House, it explains that. It says it was put there in 1962, and it says in the visitor's guide, it's been published for many years, it said Congress voted to place that there as a rebuke to the Soviets because of their philosophy during the Cold War. What was the philosophy of the Soviets? It's what Carlos just outlined, same philosophy of Cuba, the brutal dictatorship there that robbed him of his childhood and so many countless others. They've lost their lives trying to flee from that brutal dictatorship. The philosophy of the Soviets during the Cold War was Marxism, communism, socialism. That's the thing. And when Congress voted in 1962 to put that there, it was right after your childhood in the late 50s when the Castro took over and destroyed Cuba. It was a completely foreseeable result. We were fighting it during the Cold War on distant shores in the USSR. And Congress was resolute on that. They were all united, and they understood that that's not who we are as Americans. The reason we are the greatest nation in the history of the world, the most free, most successful, most powerful, most benevolent. You hear me say it all the time. The reason that we are the greatest nation is because we were built on an entirely different and opposing set of values. Congress put "In God We Trust" above the rostrum because they wanted to remind everybody who would ever serve in this body in Congress that there is a huge distinction between us and the Soviets' philosophy. Communism, Marxism, socialism, all this begins with the premise that there is no God. It's a totally different philosophy. And our declaration that we just celebrated, 250 years on July 4th, the nation's creed, as you hear me talk about all the time, the second paragraph, we hold these truths to be self-evident and all men are created equal. Our rights come from our Creator, God. They do not come from the government. The communists believe the opposite. They believe that the government the state is God. The state is the one that gives you all your rights. And you know what? The state can also take those rights away. And that's exactly what happens. It's inevitable. Communism and this philosophy has led to the murder of tens of millions of innocent people in the 20th century alone. It is a nightmare. It is a trail to certain death, okay? And that's why we're speaking in such stark terms, because we need America to wake up. We're not even, look, 35 years ago, Republicans and Democrats in Congress, when I was coming up in, the Reagan years, they were fighting communism on a distant shore. Now it's here. But in Congress, they all agreed on that. They obviously knew that we had to fight communism. And so what they were doing here for domestic policy, that was foreign policy. Domestic policy, they were arguing over, marginal tax rates and the shades of regulation and how large the government should be. There wasn't a huge difference, a chasm between the two parties. Those days are gone. Right now, domestically, we are arguing, we are debating, we are fighting. The election will be over whether we're going to maintain our freedom in a constitutional republic, the greatest experiment in self-governance in the history of the world, the longest surviving constitution on the planet, the nation that everybody wants to emulate and everybody wants to come here. We have to seal our borders so they won't flood over them. We're the only nation in the world that has that distinction. We're the last great superpower. We are the greatest nation in the history of the world. We are fighting right now in Congress over whether we're going to maintain our status as a constitutional republic or we're going to trade that in, dismantle the foundations, and go down this dark road of death to communism. That is the question on the ballot this fall. Now, DSA published their platform. I hope you're all covering. I hope you're writing in depth about their platform. I read it out at an event a few weeks ago, and they made an ad mocking me reading their platform. Now, they didn't put the clips with the worst parts of it. Representative Gimenez just told you, Carlos told you that, well, of course they want to pack the Supreme Court and they want a unicameral legislature. They want the House to run everything, abolish the Senate, because they believe the House will be run by Marxists, communists. They'll be able to run the table on everything. They want to remove the president. What they also want to do is abolish all borders. They don't want any borders. They want mass amnesty granted to anyone who can come onto our shores without exception, even for terrorists and hardened dangerous criminals. Okay? They don't want prisons. It's in their platform. They want to remove the carceral state, they said. No prisons. They don't want to fund the police. This is not a game. Everybody needs to understand these crazy little mini Mamdanis who are popping up all around the country, they are a danger to you and your family. This is not a game. If they promise you free stuff, there is far more beneath those promises that even some of these people do not understand themselves. And so we are here as the Republican Party to stand on the founding principles of the greatest nation in the history of the world. It is our duty to do that. And we're doing it on behalf of all of you, even the journalists who don't agree. Essential for your well-being and your family. This is not a game. This is not our father's Democrat Party. We're not arguing over marginal tax rates anymore. We're arguing over whether or not freedom is going to survive. And that's why we're so serious about this. Look, I'm a happy warrior, man. I like to get up and have fun, but this is not a fun time. We're in a war. We're in a philosophical war to save the greatest nation in the history of the world. And we take it very seriously. So we recruited extraordinary candidates. We are raising record amounts of money that is necessary to win these elections. And we understand everything is at stake. Ronald Reagan used to quote Abraham Lincoln, and he reminded us that America is the last best hope of man on the earth. As was asked here very well, very articulately this morning, if not here, where? There is no answer to that question. This is the best. Not a perfect nation. We're still in a process of making a more perfect union. But we are working every day to ensure that the principles of individual freedom and limited government and the rule of law and peace through strength and fiscal responsibility and free markets and human dignity are maintained, because that is the formula that makes a successful, free, happy people and a successful nation. I'll take a few questions. Yeah.
There's been a lot of discussion about what's going to be included in this reconciliation bill. Can you walk through how important and how imminent it is that the Pentagon needs additional funding and what that number precisely is going to be in the Republican bill?
The question was, can you list the specifics of what the request is for the Pentagon? We've seen it's over $350 billion as a request. And some of this is transformational kind of funding that will help us change the dynamic of the Department of War and make it more efficient and effective. It's already the greatest fighting force on the planet, not even close. But there are some ideas, a real vision on how to improve that even further, to bolster that. You've heard the president talk about how he wants to effectively double the funding for national defense. Look, we live in dangerous times. We're fighting communism on our own shores, and we're fighting evil terrorists and tyrants around the world. And we have to be able to protect our national security. So this is not the place to get into the details of that. We're having a briefing tonight at the Pentagon with House Republicans where Secretary Hegseth and his team will go through and outline a lot of this. Much of that's going to be classified, of course. But I can tell you that our resolve is to ensure if there's a list of responsibilities of the federal government, and it is a small list, the appropriate list of what the federal government is supposed to be, remembering in our match list system, under our constitutional system, most of the power is supposed to be reserved to the states and the people. But there's a few list of responsibilities that must be done by the federal government, and obviously national defense is one of them. It is the first priority to protect the people. By the way, in his State of the Union a few months back, president asked that very important question of the body. Hey, stand and applaud if you think the number one job of the federal government is to protect American citizens and not illegal aliens. Every Republican stood for long applause. Every Democrat sat scowling on their hands. That's everything you need to know. A picture's worth 1,000 words, a video's worth even more. Go replay that. We're going to take care of national defense. We're going to meet our first priorities. We're going to do it in the order that we can gather the votes for. Reconciliation 3.0 is in process. There will be a markup this week. I was on the phone with Chairman Harrington until late last night. We're working out the details of that. I'm expected to be noticed today for a markup on Thursday. And you will see the details of that. And I'm not going to unveil it here at a press conference this morning because we're working through with members, as you know how this is done, to build consensus so we can lay that out. So stay tuned for more on reconciliation.
The ICE agents who killed a person in Maine yesterday were reportedly not using body-worn cameras. And that's despite DHS officials coming to Congress and repeatedly saying over the last few months that they want to expand body camera usage. Does there need to be accountability on DHS from Congress here?
I don't know anything about this event. Okay, I was a little busy yesterday, so I'm going to reserve judgment. I know that there was a tragic shooting, and I'm not going to comment on it because I don't know. And you guys can mock me for not knowing that. I worked about 22 hours in the last few days, and I did not get the briefing on that yet. I will this morning. Yes.
Thank you, Speaker. Do you commit to putting Lindsey Graham's Russia sanctions bill on the floor in the House?
We've long supported a Russia sanctions bill. The vast majority of the Republicans do, and I was heartened to hear that apparently Senate Republicans in the White House have come up with a formula that they think will work, and we're happy to receive and process that. I think it's appropriate. I've always felt that way. So yeah.
Last question, guys.
On Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, the president says that the MOU is dead, hostilities are back on, and says the 60-day clock is just reset. Is it time to consider an AUMF vote? And when it comes to the toll that the U.S. is reportedly going to be charging, is that really proper? I mean, in the past, the administration has said there should not be a charge, and now 20%.
I'm going to let the White House answer to that. We're still awaiting further details on the toll idea. I was with the president for about 3 hours yesterday. We talked about it very briefly because we had a lot of other things on the agenda. I think we're awaiting further details, and we'll determine that. With regard to the Strait of Hormuz, there is a memo of understanding, but Iran seems to have no interest whatsoever in maintaining any of those provisions. And when they are firing on commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, it's a danger to all freedom-loving people around the world and the economies of almost every nation on the planet. And so the response from America is appropriate. What do you do with these people? Listen, they're not good faith actors. They cannot be trusted. The people that are in these negotiation rooms, as the president said himself yesterday, they will say one thing and literally walk out the door and do the opposite. So it's a very sticky situation there. When you're trying to have a negotiation with someone who you know is lying to you to your face. That's the challenge we have, and we trust the administration is going to continue to work to resolve this. We need to. We want to, of course. I'm heartened that gas prices have not risen again. We're about $70-something a barrel last time I checked. We need to keep that under control, and commerce in the Strait of Hormuz is important. There's at least, by my count, dozens of nations, scores of nations probably at this point, who are willing to assist, I think, if asked, to help police the Strait of Hormuz. So we'll see how that develops. I think it's a job for everybody.